Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. My name, of course, is Chris White. I am your host, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. And by the way, folks, these are live conversations. As I like to say, these are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And, you might even be catching the recording, but even if you're catching the recording, this session was done live. We are live here now, and there is no post processing. And I'm excited to welcome this week's guest. His name is Sameer Sahay-Kausar.
Kausar, yeah.
Kausar. He is a senior solution consultant with Homerun Presales. He is also the co-host of a podcast called A Diary of a Sales Engineer, on which I was a guest recently. I think was that posted yet or not?
We are planning on posting it in a few weeks here, so
it'll be posted in a few weeks. Okay, great. He also happens to be a part-time magician, just an all-around good guy. Sameer, thank you so much for being here, sir. Excited to have this conversation. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Ohio. We're above freezing, so you can't come freezing. It's a fantastic day. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, man. It's good to see you. So, Sameer, you and I have chatted quite a few times at this point. We've had a chance to spend a little bit of time over dinner, and you've got a great story. And the today's topic is breaking outside the comfort zone, or going outside the comfort zone. The reason this is such a meaningful topic for you is it was your willingness and the courage to sort of go outside of your own comfort zone, to take a few chances, and that is what has led you to where you are at this point in your career. So what I'd like to do, I introduced you briefly, but what I'd love to invite you to do, and by the way, folks, if you are out there, we don't have eyeballs on you. If you do care to say hello, please feel free to say hello. If you have any questions for Sameer or myself, please feel free to ask. But Sameer, do you mind giving a little bit of your background? And by the way, there's someone we both know. Well, I know you know Brian very, very well. Brian, nice to see you out there, sir. And yes, it's a pleasure to have Sameer with us. And Cliff Barcliff from Richmond, Virginia. He's been actually, both Brian and Cliff have been guests on the show. Nice to see you out there, guys. Sameer, do you mind just telling a little bit about your background, how you found yourself in a pre-sales role, and then what was that big moment where you had to go outside of your comfort zone to make a significant change in your career?
Yeah, so I started off my career as a software developer at a lovely company called Workday.
I've heard of them.
You heard of them? This small ERP company out there. When I was in college, I studied computer engineering with a minor in business, and my whole goal was always to be in between technology and business. And my 21-year-old self, fresh out of college, was like, "Oh, perfect! I'm going to build software for businesses. ERP sounds awesome. That's how I'm going to bridge the gap." I did it. Was kind of, frankly, a little bored being on the developer side. Outside of work, I was a performer. So you mentioned magic. I was also a professional dancer. So I was doing something called Bhangra.
Really? Okay. I'm making a note of that. We may circle back on that. I did not know that about you. All right.
Yeah. So performance has always been really something I enjoy in life. I was performing at Warrior Game halftime shows, Kings games, corporate events, weddings. Wow. So much so I converted my parents' garage into a dance studio to teach people who had never danced before how to dance. Was hosting events, emceeing events, doing a little bit of DJ work. So all of these things outside of work was very performative, and I very much enjoyed that. And I think the first time that I actually made an uncomfortable ask, so to speak, was 2 years into my Workday career. We had the SVP of business development for Workday Financials come in and give a talk to all of us in engineering and product to explain how the work we do as an engineer actually affects the customer. As a software developer, you're the furthest away from the customer. So I did not know what the code I was writing actually did to the business behind the scenes. And after that presentation he gave us, it was very interesting. And so at the end of the day, I just pinged him on Slack. I was like, I really enjoyed your presentation. Would love to grab coffee. Mind you, this is like 4:30, 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. And he's like, yeah, let's talk tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll grab coffee.
Yeah. Wow.
In my mind, I was like, oh, well, crap. What am I going to talk to you about?
What now?
What now? I made this ask thinking that you were going to respond to me in a week and I had some time. And so now here I am the night before thinking about, okay, what am I going to tell him about? Like, what do I actually want to talk to him about?
Yeah.
And ultimately came to the conclusion of explaining what I enjoyed about the engineering side of things and development side, what I didn't like, and then all that performative stuff that I was doing outside of work. And when I expressed all of these aspects to him, he's like, have you heard of pre-sales? Technical pre-sales. I was like, no, like, what is that? And he goes and explains what this whole sales engineering role is, introduces me to the hiring managers within Workday. Always wanted to stay at Workday to see if I could transition into pre-sales over there. And then 6 months later, coincidentally, maybe the universe heard me or something, but I got a LinkedIn DM from a recruiter asking if I was interested in a sales engineering role. And thus in 2019 transitioned from development into pre-sales and haven't looked back. Fast forward now to 2023, where I've gone through the ringer, have worked with multiple companies, helped scale up sales engineering teams, worked on the partnership side, the direct side, have experienced my fair share of layoffs. It was, laid off 3 times in 3 years, which was wild experience, but also just very humbling and gets you to learn exactly what to look for in certain companies. But that's what pushed me to go actually just cold DM Brian Lewis, who's the CRO and co-founder of Homerun Presales here.
Right.
And I just hit him up and was like, hey, Brian, are you guys hiring? Note that I hadn't had any like one-on-one conversations with him on LinkedIn at all. We had engaged with each other's posts here and there. I knew he was within the sales engineering industry. I knew of Homerun, saw their content, was like interested in the technology itself, especially because it's built by pre-sales for pre-sales. And, there's really there's a very limited set of platforms that are designed to be the way we work as pre-sales folks. So I messaged Brian saying, hey, you guys hiring? Brian said something along the lines of, not right now, but in the future, let's chat. Yeah. One conversation led to another conversation. He liked that I had a development background. He liked that I came from the pre-sales space. I had been posting relatively consistently about sales engineering prior to having this conversation. So I had a little bit of a portfolio, so to speak, on LinkedIn to see that I actually am in the space and passionate about it. Talked to the other co-founder, Kevin, and we also got along. And so we're like, okay, there could be a there, but we're still very much new. Let's start slowly. And so I started working part-time with them, 4 hours a week, turned to 8 hours a week, turned to 12, 16, 20. And over the course of 6 months, we realized, okay, this is actually like, we are working really well together. I enjoy the work. They enjoy the work. It was a win-win and ultimately came on full time. It'll almost be a year in March 18th.
Wow. It's a great story. It's interesting. And Sameer, I don't something that I may not have shared with you. I've known Brian now for at least 3 or 4 years, and so I've sort of from an outside looking in, I've had the opportunity really to watch him and Kevin and the company sort of grow from really almost just an idea. And I literally remember having a conversation with Brian probably when shortly after you first reached out to him, and he said to me, yeah, we sort of connected with this guy on LinkedIn, and we've had a few conversations, and I don't know, something tells me that he might be a good fit. I don't know that I have a lot of work for him just yet, but I remember the very early part of that sort of from Brian's perspective. So it's really amazing to see this come full circle. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to Brian and Kevin and how successful Homerun has been. And before we wrap up today, maybe we'll chat a little bit more about that. You said a number of things. Cliff actually picked one of the things that I was going to double click on. You mentioned, so it sounds like you moved into a pre-sales role in 2019. And it sounds like over the course of about 4 years, you had a few different roles. You did some partner SE role. You did some direct SE role. Sounds like you went through a few layoffs. You mentioned that you learned some of the things to look for, and Cliff has that. Do you mind elaborating on that point a little bit?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, or maybe more naive or earlier on in the career, I looked at the company and I was like, oh, it's a cool product. Like I should go join it. As
Mm,
I have gotten older, I think it really, yes, the company, the product matters, but it really more matters who your manager is. Uh,
mm,
I undervalued like the team aspect, not like the senior leadership, but that direct manager, because that's the person who is going to raise you up. That's the person who is going to put you in front of projects that you may ask for. That's the person who's going to talk about you in rooms that you're not in.
mm,
And so when it comes to like career developing and actually trying to advance your career, having a manager who will stand up for you, who will bring you into rooms that you may not be invited into, who will start looking out for opportunities because you've shared that, hey, I'm interested in doing more webinar stuff, or I'm interested in writing blog posts, or I really want to go on the conference circuit. All these little things. It's your manager who's actually the one who's going to be opening those doors for you. You
mm.
can let them know that this is my interest, but they're the ones who are going to allow you to step into that place. And I early on didn't really notice that and understand the value in that. And almost at this point, I would rather work for a really, really good manager and maybe like a semi-okay company than a really, really good company and a semi-okay manager.
Yeah, yeah. It's really it's a really valuable insight. And just to repeat what you're saying, so what you learned is that don't focus so much on the product or even the company as much as the individuals that you will be directly working with, and in particular, the individual that you'll actually be reporting to. And look, I'm sure I've been heard saying this on this very show. People don't leave companies, people leave people, right? And you're sort of saying this in reverse. So absolutely love that. I want to bring it back to the topic at hand, which is breaking outside of our comfort zone. Talk a little bit about how uncomfortable, if at all, it was to reach out to Brian in that manner when you did so, and what was it? What did you tell yourself, or what did it take for you to make that step or take that step?
Yeah, I think it I was unsure of the response, but I've always told myself that you're gonna, miss all the shots you don't take. And what's the worst he can say? Like, no, I'm not gonna talk to you.
Yeah.
And then I'm ending up the same place I started. So every time I have this conversation with myself a lot on a lot of the things that I ultimately decide to do that I'm feeling uncomfortable about. Then I go, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, the worst that can happen is I end up in the same place that I started. The best case scenario is I can get a job, really extend my career, really like the upside is way higher than the
Mm.
downside.
Amen.
And so I have that conversation all the time, even when it comes to like posting on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, is anyone going to read anything that I write? Like, does it really matter? And then it's like, well, if one person reads it and it changes one person, that's enough. You know, that's all you need. And if no one reads it, I have shifted it to be like, okay, what was 3 months ago Sameer wanting to have? What was 6 months ago? 3 years ago? What were things that would have been valuable for me? And I tend to write for my younger self. And
Mm.
like another thing that I think about is, you know, taking risks end up being able to give you the best stories. And when it comes to like thinking about 10 years from now, me at 40, what are the stories that I'm going to be telling about the past 10 years?
Mm.
Majority of those stories are going to be times when I stepped out of my comfort zone, did something that I was unsure if it was going to prevail or not, did something that maybe I had to overcome a lot of obstacles. And those are the best stories that I want to be telling in the future. And so I constantly just be like, okay, put yourself 10 years ahead. When I look back, how do you think you're going to feel about the situation? Are you going to be regretful that I didn't take the chance to take the plunge and go and cold reach out to Brian, someone who I, didn't know, frankly? Or am I going to be like, oh yeah, I reached out to him. It turned out well. Now that's like something I'm writing a book about.
It's amazing. And by the way, I just wrote this down. Taking risks gives you the best stories. I'm reminded, it's ironic. My wife and I just happened to stumble upon a movie a week or so ago called We Bought a Zoo. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's got Matt Damon in it. And there's a scene in the movie near the end of the movie where he's talking to his son and he says, 20 seconds of courage. That's all it takes. Just 20 seconds of courage, and no more, no less. And that's sort of what you're talking about. And Sameer, as you were talking, I found myself thinking about some of the things that I've done in the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, that certainly pushed me way outside of my comfort zone. Publishing a book, certainly not being the least of those. Launching a business, not being the least of those. But here's the interesting thing, and I'm interested to see if you find this too. The feeling never goes away. And what do I mean by that? To this day, even when I do sessions like you and I are doing right now, there's always a touch of discomfort. There's a touch of, is anybody actually going to care? Imposter syndrome is something that I think, even though, I think a lot of people look at my situation and think, well, you've done this, you've done this, you've done that. It still doesn't get much easier. Have you discovered that for yourself as well?
Oh, absolutely. Like, even when we were talking before jumping on this, I was like, wow, I'm sweaty. Like, I'm feeling nervous here. And it's like, yeah, I've talked plenty of times. We've been to this plenty of times, but I don't think it necessarily gets easier. You just get better at pushing yourself through that.
Mm.
And and I think that's okay. You're flexing the muscle of being comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's something that will serve you in all parts of life, whether it's, you're physically training for something, whether you're trying to get a promotion at work, whether you're negotiating your salary. Oh my God, so many times I was so uncomfortable negotiating my salary while trying to, transitioning new jobs. You say a number, you stand there, it's silent for 10 seconds, and those are the longest 10 seconds of your life. But after the fact, it was worth it. And like those, you're always going to be uncomfortable, I feel like. And if you are continuously push yourself to try and achieve more and become more rounded human, you're going to be uncomfortable. And it's in that uncomfort that is where growth is found. Mm. And if I'm not uncomfortable, that means I'm playing it safe. It comes back to, I want to be able to tell good stories when I'm older. If I'm playing it safe, you're not going to have good stories.
Yeah. And so many things that you just said. By the way, Asif Ahmad just joined us. Asif, it's nice to see you, my friend. Being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I literally think those words have been spoken on this show before by another guest, and I could not agree more. The other thing that you mentioned, Sameer, that I want to double click on, and I was about to say this and you said it for me. Here's the truth, and it's an unfortunate truth. All of our growth lives beyond the sphere of comfort. It lives beyond the sphere of comfortable. We have to break through the comfort zone in order to grow. By the way, I was just inspired to share. Cliff shared a brief story. My wife and I took a risk from quoting our very first job to sale for quitting. I think he meant quitting. Wow, that's a great story. I would love to hear more about that sometime, Cliff. Maybe I'll have to have you back on. Most experienced SEs get a little nervous. Absolutely. So let's talk about this a little bit further, Sameer. Let's for those out there who maybe they're sales engineers, maybe they're aspiring sales engineers or thinking about getting into this profession. I think we do have a tendency to sort of live in this sort of fine line between comfort and discomfort. And I don't think we want to be too far on either side, right? There are certain areas that we want to sort of stay, and you're a performer, so you understand this, right? It's like giving doing a trick in front of an audience. You don't necessarily want to do a trick that maybe you haven't practiced and haven't performed before, but I think there's also a certain element of discomfort. Talk about how important this is as a sales engineer and what someone out there in the field might do to sort of strike that balance.
Yeah, I mean, if we take the performance stance of it, your set is often comprised of different components. Same with your demo. Your demo has different components within it. And as you are revolutionizing it, trying to take it to the next level, I would recommend just tweaking one piece of it. So I have 10 steps. I'm going to tweak step number 7 and see how the audience responds. That way, all the other 9 are doing exactly the same thing. That way, if part 7 stumbles, it's not going to ruin the whole flow. But if part 7 hits, oh, now you're like, okay, let me try that one more time. Oh, that hit again. Let me try it one more time. Okay, now this is going to go part of my flow. And that, to your point, we can't take too big of a leap out of our comfortable zone, because otherwise it's going to be too scary, frankly. We have to take one hop away, so to speak. And that then allows you to be like, okay, I was able to do that. Maybe I can push it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I can just do it a little bit more, because, as all of the adages, it's one step at a time. Like, you don't climb a mountain by jumping to the top. It's one foot after another, and you slowly increase it. So even like all the greatest, take stand-up comedy, for example, when they're building their set, you don't see them botching it, 55 minutes of the 60 at a local club as they're trying to build this set. They are piecing together 5 minutes. Okay, this was a good 5 minutes. This was a good 5 minutes. This was a good 5 minutes. Now I'm ready for prime time. Similarly, there's been so many times where internally I've been like, hey, Brian, I want to try this new thing. I showed it to him, and we're like, no, that did not work. Like, we scrap it, throw it away. Like, let's not do that. So I think there's a couple things. One is tweaking just a little bit when you're live performing, just to see how that lands. And then 2 is, if you really want to do an overhaul, do it in a safe place, but like internally, where you have the room to like fall and not have it impact the business or impact anything on the outside.
Yeah. Well, and you were mentioning the importance of assessing the individual who you'll be working for. And part of that is open communication and trust. Obviously, in the case of Brian, you can bring something to him and he will give you honest, direct feedback. And there's a trust relationship there. The other thing that I hear you saying, which I think is so powerful, is experimentation. Experiment with new things, experiment with maybe a different approach, but don't overhaul the entire presentation or demonstration necessarily. Maybe experiment with a few different things. Noah Curran chimed in. Noah, nice to see you on the topic of being comfortable versus uncomfortable, or comfortable being comfortable. What tips do you have when performing outreach specifically related to trying to attain a sales engineer solution role? I'm an agile product manager with transferable skills. Noah, great question. Thank you for asking. Sameer, this is very similar to your situation when you were with Workday and you were a developer and hadn't even broken into pre-sales yet. Certainly, I have a thought that I can share with Noah as well. But Sameer, any thoughts to share for Noah?
Yeah, I think especially when you're transitioning from one profession into sales engineering, the best thing you can do is start reaching out to other SEs in the field. Mm-hmm. And the important thing with this reach out is you're not reaching out asking for a job. That's not going to fly. That doesn't sit well with anyone. You're reaching out of curiosity. Hey, I'm interested in sales engineering, solutions consulting, technical pre-sales, whatever their title is. Would love to learn about your experience, because I really want to transition into that profession. And that's where the conversation starts.
Yeah.
What I know about every SE out there is, when someone comes to us genuinely curious about our profession, we will love to talk to you, because we love what we do and we want to share it with the world, and we want everyone to know what it is, because frankly, we're the best profession that nobody's heard of. So I would first start there. And then now you're starting to put out into the world that, hey, I'm interested in transitioning. Chris knows I'm interested. Brian knows. Sameer knows. Kevin knows. All these people know I am interested in transitioning, because I've had these coffee conversations, learning about them learning about me, all from a curiosity perspective. Now they're going to be consciously or unconsciously primed to pay attention. Oh, this could be a good role for Noah. He's transitioning in. This is a first-time SE role. Let me go shoot it over to him and let him know. Then I think the next step, and something that I had done when trying to transition, was the last part of the Workday interview process to get into pre-sales was a 10-minute why Workday pitch. And so I had developed a pitch. Workday had a lot of resources where I could record myself and giving the demo. So I did that, had the pitch, and I sent it over to the hiring managers asking for feedback, not asking, hey, hire me, just asking for feedback about how this pitch went. And in that way, you're not being like, hey, I need a job. Can you look at this? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, I genuinely want feedback back. And now, again, they're primed to be like, oh, yeah, there's a job opening. I remember Sameer sent me a demo or a Y Workday pitch. Okay, maybe we bring them in to talk to because there is something there. So all you're doing is broadening your reach, letting other people know what you're interested in. And then people will naturally come because people want to help. Everyone wants to help you out in some sort of way, but they don't want to be, oh, the stranger is be like, hey, can you I see this job on your job portal. Can you recommend it to me? It's like, I don't know who you are. Like, why would I recommend you? I have no idea who you are. I'm not going to go out of my way to maybe risk my own abilities to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to recommend this stranger. But if you come to me and be like, hey, I'm interested in this. This is what I'm working on. Can you give me feedback about this? That's a completely different perspective. And now I'm getting to know you. And now I have actual information where I can be like, oh, I could recommend you because now I know you more.
It's fabulous. It's great advice, Sameer. The other thought or another thought that comes to mind, similar to what you're saying here, and Noah, you mentioned that you believe you've got transferable skills. You very likely do. But as Sameer is suggesting, reach out to some people maybe you're connected with on LinkedIn who are in the profession and bounce those off of them. These are what I think my transferable skills are. Do you agree? And could I have an opportunity to, quote, demonstrate some of those skills that I think I have? I think that's really powerful. The other thing, and you said this earlier, Sameer, you said you put it out in the universe. Sometimes, and I believe this to be so true, when we put things out in the universe goes to somehow, and I don't know how, but somehow the universe goes to work to make it happen or bring it to reality. It's sort of a Cliff said. You don't get what you don't ask for. Really well said. By the way, one other comment that Cliff made that I wanted to just click on, this idea of experimentation. He mentioned that's what he that's why he loves working a trade show booth. That's a great idea. You get to try out some new approaches or techniques without it being too much of a risky proposition. Sameer, let me press pause just for a moment. Folks, I'm speaking to Sameer Sahay-Kausar. Did I get it right?
You got it.
Love that. He is a senior solution consultant with Homerun Presales. He's also the co-host of a podcast called A Diary of a Sales Engineer, which I think I'll actually be appearing on sometime in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited to see that. We don't see you out there. You can see a few folks are chiming in with some comments and questions. If you care to ask another question or say hello, please feel free to do so. We're talking a little bit about breaking outside our comfort zone. Sameer shared with us that really a couple times in his career, at first he was a developer, and really you broke outside of your comfort zone by reaching out to an SVP who came in to sort of talk about the impact on the customers and the industry really. And you said, hey, you want to get coffee? And he said, sure. And then you realize, oh crap, I probably need to come up with something to say. And then you were in pre-sales for about 4 years. You went through a couple layoffs. You learned more about what you were looking for, and you reached out to Brian. He didn't know you, you didn't know him, and here we are a few years later. What, as you reflect on this journey, what are some things that really jump out to you as things that you've learned beyond what we've talked about already? Is there anything in particular that really jumps out at you as, man, that was a really valuable lesson, and I'm in a better place as a result?
Yeah, I definitely, there's like a couple things that pop up, especially when I was first getting into the pre-sales role. There is a difference between like giving a presentation and giving a demo. And I think at first, when I first got into the pre-sales role, I was just presenting and not demoing. And to make this a little bit more concrete, the presentation was, okay, this is a canned thing. Here's my script. I'm following it. Boom, boom, boom. Do it. Rinse and repeat. The demo actually becomes, okay, I have asked some questions. I have dug deeper into those answers of those questions. And now I'm only showing the part of the presentation that matters. And for a while, it took me time to actually understand that. And then as soon as that clicked, my demos became a lot better. The outcome of those demos became better because now the prospects were like, okay, this person heard me. This is how they're going to solve my problems. And I actually felt like that wasn't a waste of my time because we were able I learned something by the end of that call that I didn't have before. And so the biggest thing of going from presentation to demo is understanding what are the needs, because your product can do a lot of things, but your customer doesn't care. They only care about the things that will solve what they are looking for. And if you have a problem that solves 12 different problems, but your customer only has one of those issues, why are you talking about the 11 different solutions? So that took me a while to understand, especially because the first product I sold was an RPA solution, a robotic process automation solution, which was pretty much a platform that you could build whatever you wanted to.
Right.
I could have use cases in healthcare. I could have use cases in insurance. I could have in telecommunications, pretty much everything. And so understanding what their specific use case was and then designing the demo essentially on the fly to be able to show that really like ramped up my ability as an SC and like drew me higher within the organization and ultimately led to closing more deals because I actually was showing them the one thing they cared about and threw away the 11 others. Even though to me, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Our product does all of this. It's so awesome. They could care less.
Yeah, people don't care. And I absolutely love this, Sameer. And I'm always looking for new perspectives, new definitions, and hearing you create a contrast, if I can use that term, between giving a presentation and giving a demonstration. To be honest, I wasn't exactly sure where you're going at first, but I love this. The definition you're using for presentation is basically you have a script, you show up, you follow your script, and you just dump that information on them. And it's not customized, it's not configured, it's not personalized in any manner. It's just sit down and let me tell you what I have to tell you, as opposed to the way you're describing a demo, which is it's much more customized. It's configured to their specific needs, their specific interests. It's based on some discovery that you've done, and maybe it's done in real time, right? Maybe you ask a few questions, and based on that, you go from 10 things to 2 things, and you focus on those 2 things. I absolutely, and in fact, to me, I would argue that is one of our most important jobs. And I'm going to take for a moment, it's not the ability to demo. It's the ability to ask questions, understand what it is that they're interested in, what they're trying to achieve, and then figure out the best way to position and explain your solution in a way that's relevant to them. In fact, I have a term that I'm going to share with you. I'm interested to get your feedback. So I'll be giving a talk at the virtual Demo Fest here in about a month or 2. And the term is inspirational relevance. Inspirational relevance. I think our demos, we should strive for inspirational relevance. What do I mean by that? Let's go in reverse order. First of all, they should be relevant to the individuals, right? What they care about. This is really what you... And second, they should be inspirational. They should be inspiring in some way, to the point where it inspires the group to move forward. Do those words strike a chord with you?
They do. It kind of reminds me. I recently rewatched Inception last week, and one of the things he said was the most infectious virus is an idea. And so in that sense, right, you're in inspirational relevance. You're inspiring them to think that there's a different way that we can do what we're doing. You're giving them an idea that they're coming to the conclusion to themselves, which is ultimately what's going to have them talk about you in the rooms that you're not in, because deals are closed in rooms that you're not in. You have to inspire the people you are demoing to with the relevant topics that matter to them to make them think that this is the best way to move forward in order for me to actually spend 6 figures with you.
Man, I'm inspired now. So I need to go back and watch that movie. The most infectious virus is an idea. Do you remember what part of the movie was that? Early, late in the movie?
It was. He talks about it multiple times in that movie where. All
right, that's okay.
It's an old movie, so I don't want to do spoilers. But yeah, it's across the movie. I think the first time he talks about it is one of the first 10 minutes.
I don't remember, and I've seen the movie, but I don't remember that. Now you've inspired me to go back, because I may borrow a video clip or two from that movie to help make some of my points. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. I want to take this one step further. You talked about your perspective of the difference between a presentation and a demo. We also talked about the fact that you've spent a lot of time in your, not just your career, but your life being a performer. So how important is it to also be a performer when giving a demonstration, more so than customizing and personalizing and some of the other things we talked about?
I think it's very important that you have a performance aspect of your demonstrations. Frankly, we need to have some type of engagement. If I'm not excited about showing you what we can solve, how do I expect you to be excited about it? If my energy is not high, how can I expect you to have high energy? Even through Zoom, I can have my vocal tonality, I can move my hands around. I am still in a 2D space, but I can still raise my voice, lower my voice, give different aspects. And through that excitement, through that performance, now you're going to have increased engagement. If you go and watch a show, a live show or a movie, they are all performing, and that's what's causing you to pay attention and stay aware. If you're watching something that's frankly boring, you're going to whip out your phone, you're going to go and do something else. You're going to lose the audience's attention. So having that performance aspect is, I think, key for you to even get your message across. If you look back to even when you were studying, you were in school, I guarantee the best teachers that you had, where you learned the most, were the ones who made it engaging and were performative while they were trying to teach you something. That's what we have to do. We have to be able to weave in jokes into the script. We have to be able to make it in such a way that they are entertained, to be honest. A book just came out called Demotainment, right? You had him on a couple weeks ago.
Mike was on the show,
right? So that's very much necessary for you to keep the attention of the audience, as they do need to be entertained. You have to have a performative aspect, because if I am monotone, if I am sounding like an AI robot, like, I'm not going to pay attention as a prospect, as someone who's on the other side of the screen, other side of the presentation. We've all sat in those presentations where it's just monotone. The person's just really boring. They're like not really into it, versus like, oh, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm energetic, the caffeine has been hitting me. Like those times that you're just like, oh wow, I'm feeling juiced up because the person who is giving the presentation is juiced up. So we pick up on the energy that's put out. It comes back to what we put out into the universe will come back to us. So you have to have high energy. You have to do that performative aspect. And a lot of SCs love that part of the job, because by nature, by the way that our role works, we have that technical, that analytical side, but there's always that creative side that we like to merge together. And that's why we became SCs. If we really wanted to stay on the technical side, we could have gone and continued to be an engineer. If we really wanted just to be on the performance side, we would have stuck with just sales. But we like being in that middle part. So we like being technically and performative. It's the best.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. And to repeat some of what you're saying, and I couldn't agree more, it's bringing a certain sense of enthusiasm and energy. It's you talked about using your voice, your hands. I'm certainly the guy who's always sort of waving my hands, and I think it's facial expressions. Some people tell me, Chris, I feel like there's a line over which it's too much and we can go overboard, and it can start to sound or come across inauthentic how do you ever observe that? And if so, how do we manage bringing that level of energy, but not going too far overboard that it almost sounds now artificial?
Yeah, it's a excellent thing to think about. From my perspective, we all are naturally enthusiastic about something. You know, there's something that you get me started talking about. I like naturally just get enthusiastic about it. And no matter how excited I am, it's authentic because I am genuinely excited about it. Like for me right now, it's a style of training using kettlebells and swinging weights around. Like you get me started on that, I will like get really excited about it. And I think if you are naturally excited about the product you are selling, the problem you are solving, something about the technology, that's going to show up and you're not going to lose your authenticity because you are genuinely excited about it. Like there's never going to be a time where I was like, oh, that person was way too excited about that thing. If they're genuinely excited about it, it lines up because we have this ability as humans to be like, oh, there's something that's like off. His voice sounds really excited, but his body language is like telling me something different. But if everything is aligned because you have a genuine excitement, I don't think you could overdo it and be like non-authentic.
So well said. And Sameer, I literally wrote down these words: naturally enthusiastic. And you're 100% right. I don't know, not sure I've thought about it quite in this way, but I think one of the things that would be worthwhile for us to do as sales engineers is for us to first come to peace with, are we or are we not enthusiastic about not only the product, but the problems that we solve? You know, another gentleman that I worked with years ago, he said, fall not in love with the product, fall in love with the problem you solve, which just great words. But the other thought that comes to mind, and then this is the part that maybe I haven't thought of before, is chances are good there are some aspects or components or parts of the solution that you sell that you're particularly enthusiastic about. And there's probably some aspects that you're not, for whatever reason, they're just not as interesting to you. They're right. And so I think it's important for us to recognize what those are or what is in both categories. And if we're talking about the things that we're naturally enthusiastic about it, we don't have to worry about that. But if there are certain things that maybe we're not as enthusiastic about it, I think we have to be cautious about trying to just force enthusiasm when in fact that may actually become or come across a little bit inauthentic. So love the fact that you said that. By the way, Cliff mentioned a comment about playing a piece of music. Love that idea. He was also a church organist who knew, and really tough. The more experience, yes, it is very hard not to slip into false performance. That's really well said. One of the terms that I like is whenever we're going in, we need to quote clear our mental cache. We all know what it means to clear the cache in our computer or our browser. We need to clear our mental cache, right? Yes, we've done this probably 100 times. But this is the first time this customer or this prospect has heard of our solution. So we need to treat it like this is the first time, right? So hopefully that helps us build some enthusiasm. Sameer, I'm going to pause just one more time, folks. I'm speaking to Sameer Sahay-Kausar. He is a senior solution engineer or solution consultant with Homerun Presales. He's also the one of two co-hosts of a podcast called The Diary of a Sales Engineer. Sameer, you mentioned to me that you've actually you've got to go do your day job at the top of the hour. So we're going to wrap things up here in 10 minutes or less. I have just a few more questions. Can I indulge you for just a few more minutes, sir?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So in the opening, I mentioned that you're also a part-time magician. And I found out firsthand, folks, over dinner, just how good this guy is at magic tricks. And I don't recall if I asked you at the time, but I'm going to ask you now. Remind me, when and how did you learn to do magic?
Yeah, I started doing magic at 12 years old, and it was inspired by a family friend. He got a PhD in magic and UX design. So his thesis was around how you can use magic and organizing the trick in a user experience. So you can
Wow.
almost like guide the user. If you think about really good UX design, you're not thinking. You're just like, oh, this is intuitive. I'm clicking here and I'm getting my process done. And so
Wow.
throughout magic, as you're performing certain things, there's a way that you're guiding your audience throughout the trick, and all of a sudden, boom, like something appeared. But that was planned, way early on before. And so he was the first one I saw do like close-up magic. And candidly, he had a very attractive wife, and I asked him like how they got together, and he said that he had swooned her over magic, and he's kind of a a nerdy, geeking looking guy. So I was like, oh, there's a little bit of mismatch. How did that? And 12-year-old me was like, okay, I'm gonna go do magic because I want to like talk to girls. But as I started performing it and like practicing it, I really fell in love with the technical aspects of learning, the slightest touch in your fingers to be able to detect, is this one card I'm holding, two cards, or three cards? If I move my hand in this way and I tweak it ever so slightly, that allows me to get away with this move. There's certain ways that I have to position my body in order for you not to see a flash of the stuff that I'm doing. I really enjoy that whole technical side of card tricks. And then part of me also enjoyed being able to be like ethically deceptive. So I am technically lying to you as I'm going through the magic trick, but I'm not doing anything harmful. And so I enjoyed that part of it because, I got to perform. I played dumb. Oh, I messed up the trick. But then in fact, messing up the trick is part of the trick. And so as I started learning more and more, as I started performing in front of the audience, I realized I really enjoyed the energy and the feedback that I was getting back. And then I just kept following more and more and more. And also, magic did help me land my wife today. And she always actually said, can you do another one? Can you do a new trick? And it's a lot of fun. I very much enjoy that, just the performative aspect, the technical aspect, and came across it because I had a family friend who performed some magic for me. I was interested, and then it's been about 15, 18 years now.
Absolutely love it. By the way, Brian says if you see Sameer in person, ask him to do the home run card trick. Did you do the home run card trick for me? Is that one I saw or no?
Yeah, that was one of them that we did.
Okay.
That's
okay.
In New York was when I first performed it to folks. I had talked to Brian when we were in London for Demo Fest. I was like, Brian, I have this idea. Can I run it by you? I gave him the overall idea about it, and then did it the first time in New York, and that's one of the ones you saw. And then did it again in San Francisco for folks over there. And so
awesome.
it's a lot of fun because, again, the story around like a trick is fine, right? I can make a card appear at the top of the deck, cool. But if I wrap it in a story, now you're invested. Now it's more than a trick. Now I'm associating that in the sense of home run. The basic trick is I am bringing a card up to the top of the deck. Now I've wrapped it with the home run angle of home run is now taking all of your SE insights. No matter where they go, it is popping it up to the top. It's getting in front of your CRO. It's getting in front of your product team. It's getting all of that valuable information that we are gathering as SEs day in and day out in the trenches to the rest of the company, ultimately rising the rest of the company and pushing the company to a positive direction.
The synergies or the correlation to our role and our job as sales engineers is so palpable for me. And you just said it. It's the story that makes the trick memorable. It's the story that makes the trick engaging and brings people in. That's precisely what stories do to demos.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this to you before, and I think you've read the book. I mean, I've got a small section of the book where I talk about the magic trick. And in a lot of the workshops that I run, I literally do a magic trick. Now, my magic trick is nowhere near as good as yours. And that's something that, I'm just going to have to live with. And I'd love to learn, some of the quote techniques that you have. But to me, it's such a powerful metaphor for an effective demo. And I wrote these words down because I love them. Ethically deceptive. And when I was in the field, I used to have, in fact, I even have people accuse me at times of using smoke and mirrors. And my response was, I'm not doing anything that they couldn't do. They just don't know how to do what it is that I'm demonstrating for them. But this is completely and totally within the reasonable confines of the solution. And I think that's what you're talking about. Are there any or what we probably could have spent an hour just talking about this. Maybe I'll invite you back and we'll just talk about how magic applies to our jobs. But is there one thing in particular that you would say you've learned or you can apply in your role as a sales engineer that you learned in doing magic all these years?
Oh man, I could say so much. You're absolutely right. We could go down and talk about this for a long time. I think the one thing that does pop into my mind immediately is audience management. In magic, there are usually three types of people. There's those people who are like, oh, that was awesome. Like, how'd you do that? Amazing. They're like your hype people. You have the people who are, a wall. They don't really give you any responses. And then you have the people who are like, do it again. I don't believe you. Like, I want to figure out how to do it. They're the ones who are trying to poke holes through everything. Similarly, as an SC, you have the person who is like, oh yeah, this is amazing. This is going to solve all my problems. You have someone who is, maybe on mute, no camera on, and you're like, I have no idea how they're responding to this. Then you have that really annoying person who's super technical or who's in IT who is like, let's click on that button and go down that one rabbit hole. And when there's 10 other people on the call. And so understanding those three personas of your audiences and then being able to manage them appropriately has been really strong as an SC. It's like, okay, I know this person is going to ask me these technically obscure questions. So how am I going to manage them in this group setting in order for me not to get derailed, not for everyone else to shut down? How do I keep that performance moving forward without them coming in and being like, hey, let's get into this really technical talk on the weeds? How do I be like, okay, that's a great question. Why don't me and you set up 20 minutes after the call or 20 minutes later down the line, and we'll dive deeply into it because, frankly, the CRO doesn't care about this, and they're on the call as well.
And by the way, Ron Whitson just tuned in. Don't click it; it's a trap. Ron, good to see you, my friend. I don't know how long you've been with us, but Ron, as everyone knows, he's the author of A Friendly Human in Pre-Sales, and certainly has been a guest on the show quite a few times. Sameer, I'm going to just have to have you back, and we're going to spend an hour. We will probably fill an hour talking about how demos and doing magic are similar and what we can learn from one to the other. Because you just triggered so many thoughts for me. So absolutely love this idea of audience management, and I know there's a number of. And by the way, I think back and I reference the 6 Habits all the time, right? You think about the practice that goes into it. You think about the preparation that goes into it, right? And of course, you need to perform. And just as you said, you need to position your body in a certain way. You need to manage the audience. You need to tell a story and bring them along for a ride. Even you even said, and I learned this the hard way. I was doing the one trick that I can do. I actually made a mistake once, and it was a complete disaster. But I realized after the fact that if I actually added a mistake in the trick, it like elevated the energy and the tension. And then when I unveiled sort of the solution, right, it made it that much more impactful. So anyway, we will go down that path another time. I know you've got to run in just a minute. I want to give you just a quick moment. Take 60 or 90 seconds. Talk just for a moment. What's new with Homerun Presales, and how are things going, and what's new in Homerun Presales?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Homerun Presales is your dedicated workspace to help you get through your day. As a sales engineer, we are critical when it comes to actually getting the deal closed. We've seen all the stats, deals with SEs and deals without SEs. The ones with SEs are exponentially more likely to close. But we don't necessarily have a tool built for us. A lot of people were forced to, maybe we get a few fields in Salesforce. Maybe I have some Notion template. Maybe I got my own personal notes. I got some things in Slack. I got some stuff in Jira. I have stuff everywhere. And Homerun's goal, we built something for ourselves. We're like, this is a mess. Why are we such a critical role, and why do we not have something built for the way we work? And so in comes Homerun, allows you to have one workspace to manage, track, and engage with all your deals. And if you are interested in more, we do have a lot of exciting things that we've just pushed out. Feel free to contact Brian or I. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to show Homerun off. And also, I just think as an SC industry as a whole, we are naturally MacGyvers. So we will take what we have and Frankenstein something together. But we do deserve something that is built for us, by us, for us. And so don't be afraid to ask for these things. It's part of who we are as a person, is like, oh, we'll figure out, we'll make do with what we have. But there's times where we shouldn't have to do that. Like, having our own application will improve our performance, which will improve the sales performance, which will improve the company performance. So it's a win-win all around. And I'd love to show you Homerun. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, shoot us a note. Brian and I love talking about it. We love talking to pre-sales teams. We love showing them what a world-class pre-sales team does and how Homerun helps enable that.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, Sameer. I will just say that I've been a huge fan of Homerun Presales from the very beginning. So if you're not familiar with Homerun, I encourage you to reach out to Sameer or Brian Lewis. I know you got to go, Sameer. Hang around just for a second backstage. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Folks, for those of you who tuned in live, thanks so much for being here. If you caught the recording, thanks for hanging around. You can follow #TechSalesAdvice if you want to see these more often. And of course, go to techsalesmastery.com to learn more about what we do. I will be back next week with the next episode of Tech Sales Advice. Have a good week, all.
Thank you, everyone.